Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the I'm Peaking podcast. This is going to be episode 1 of season 2. We are just coming back from a big break. A little disclaimer for this episode. It is going to be a pretty heavy episode. We are going to be talking about stuff related to SA, and there will be a lot of trigger warnings. So just a fair warning, if you are easily affected by stuff like that, then I would either skip through it or just not watch it. Another thing I wanted to talk about is, obviously you can see here that Mickie is not here right now. Mickie is currently taking a step back from the podcast for a little bit. She's also focusing on school and just her mental health in general. So we wanted to make that apparent, but she will be back.
Yeah. She'll be back in a couple episodes. She just won't be in the first couple for this season, just to work on her mental health in school and whatnot.
Yeah. But anyways, we are your hosts. I'm Devin.
I'm Nand.
I'm Brin.
And here with us today we have
Stacey. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Stacey.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It worked out perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about Good Night Out as well?
Yeah, so my name is Stacey. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I recently learned there's Vancouver in Washington.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Canadian Vancouver.
Nice.
And up there I'm a nurse, and
how nice.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah, all of my nursing career has been spent in harm reduction, so supporting people who use drugs.
That's awesome.
In some capacity in a variety of different settings. And I'm co-founder and education director for a project called Good Night Out.
Yes.
Which is kind of how we got linked up.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll talk about Good Night Out more, but Good Night Out is a nonprofit organization that is focused on, literally as it sounds, creating good nights out through the prevention of sexual violence. We work in all types of spaces where people socialize, so bars, restaurants. And for some reason, particularly electronic music has taken quite a liking to this topic, and I'm really interested in it.
Yeah.
So I work with a lot of festivals, a lot of individual artists. You might have seen Grizz in the past year announced his little Harmony project. Yeah. That's a partnership between Good Night Out and Dance Safe and him. And we do work in all genres, but like I said, electronic music has really been really kind to us and welcomed us to have this conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember you telling me that, or was it you guys are kind of like the primary nonprofit, at least for the EDM space, in terms of SA prevention and awareness?
Yeah, we have a particular lens that is really well suited to electronic music. It's not that there's anything about this particular genre that creates SA. It's just got a lot of the risk factors that make it really 100%. Important to talk about these things. Then I also do run the harm reduction program for, I never know if Americans have heard of Canadian festivals.
Have you heard about Veld?
Veld.
Yes.
No, I haven't. No, remember the social media team? So for last year, to tangent on TikTok, have you heard of Veld? Started showing up on everybody's profile, video.
Oh, really?
They had a great marketing team. They were commenting on everyone's TikTok video
you could find for EDM creators or just ravers in general. If there was an EDM related video, have you heard of Veld? Have you heard of Veld?
Oh.
Everywhere. It was nonstop.
Shambhala? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, so Shambhala. So Shambhala is also held in BC. I work for Base Coast though. So we're like the other bigger BC based festival.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, that's awesome. I was going to ask you too, are you like a raver yourself? Do you...
I feel like I have aged out of the term raver, but there was a point in my life.
You can never age out.
I still go to shows and do festivals, but that particular label I feel like no longer fits. But there was a time where I was definitely wearing fat pants and calling myself a raver for sure. Yeah.
When was that? At what time? In your life?
I'm not going to out my age on your
yeah, that's right. No worries.
In my early 20s. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that
that's
makes sense. Yeah. I feel like times have changed. We've talked about this all the time. A lot of people, they hit their mid 20s and they're like, all right, I'm done raving. Yeah. But nowadays, we have friends who are in their 30 plus range, and like
we have friends in our 40s.
Yeah, in their 40s, and they're still going. Don't get me wrong, where they live in the crowd is very different.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I definitely still go to shows. I still go to festivals. It's just there are other parts of my life that have taken precedent now, but obviously my work keeps me really attached to the scene, which is really important. I just get to like give back, and it was like a lifetime of being a rave mom has now become my job. So it's sweet.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's literally your job now.
It is literally my job. It is how I've been blessed to be able to earn a living, which is like such a gift.
Yeah. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
We just got back from Beyond, actually. We just had Beyond this last weekend. So we were gonna, how was your guys' Beyond? Well, you went to Vegas for a day.
I mean, she still went to Beyond the first day.
Yeah. It was cool.
That's true.
It was a good time.
It was really cold.
Yeah.
It was cold.
The Canadian in the room is
still
like,
chapped.
It's
like, are you sure?
What's your idea behind cold?
It was mostly just windy, and like in regards to like Beyond, I had a good time still, but I will say, what?
I was gonna say, like, you just said, you're like, it was mostly windy, says the man who bought a $75 sweatshirt because he was so cold.
No, well, you make it sound like windy is not.
No, but it's the way you said it so casually.
well, yeah. Like, am I supposed to be like, oh my God, it was so windy, I was losing all of my temperature? No,
I thought you were gonna be like, it was really cold because I had to buy a $75 sweatshirt.
Nah, I mean, that's like people complaining about LA for the traffic. Like, that's not important. It's windy in San Bernardino. It's cold. It happens. Take care of your body. Take care of yourself. Go get a sweater. If you need to pay money to get a sweater, you do it.
It was warm last year, though. To be fair, so I assumed
it was warmer.
Like,
Beyond.
Right.
I'm not gonna let the weather define whether or not I had a good time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I still had a good time. I was with my friends. I got to see good music. Don't get me wrong. I was stressed with the work that I need to get done. But I will say the one big negative, they keep overselling NOS events lately.
Yeah.
They keep overselling it. Like we're full sardines the whole time. And it's one after another lately. And I get it. People want to be a part of this community, and I love it. But they need to figure out a new path, like a walking path or something.
Yeah, I mean, they did a great job they opened up a fifth stage that they had closed down for a little bit.
I was just happy they had the green stage
open. It has like 5 different panels, and there's bleachers stage. On that side.
That's what they called it for Hard Summer. Yeah, sorry, the Mad Hatter stage.
Yeah, but there's bleachers, so people could sit down and chill up there if they want to take a little break.
For a little bit.
That's
how you know we're old.
That's the difficult one with the bottleneck walkway, though.
Yeah, the pressure I think to recoup costs after 3 years of no events is very real, and so I think it's really easy to oversell. I
didn't even think of that.
Yeah, and maybe that trim corners. Yeah.
I would like to say, though, I'm really happy that a lot of artists are now incorporating drum and bass within their sets.
Yes.
Because I know at TSO and Ultra, there was a drum and bass song, and I was like, whoa, no way, as a headliner slot, that's sick. It's opening up new genres for the common person who's going to these festivals.
That is one of the biggest difference I've noticed between Canadian shows and American shows. I feel like drum and bass is always a fixture, particularly on the West Coast and Pacific Northwest, which makes sense that you maybe heard it. Because it's in Washington, right? Beyond? Yeah. But
no, Beyond was here.
Oh, sorry.
There is a Beyond in Washington.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like there's just always drum and bass at Canadian festivals. So I'm happy that it's spreading.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. We've been calling it a movement lately, and we talk about it on every episode. We did when we have an artist in here, we're like, but do you like drum and bass though? Yeah. And the last artist we shot with, he had just made a drum and bass song, and so we're all super hyped.
Yeah, it's all about just getting comfortable with artists releasing this music, because it's scary. It's a risk of am I going to be able to hit the right market, especially in the US? If you only perform in the US and you throw drum and bass in there, is the crowd going to like it?
It can be polarizing for sure.
Yeah. I think if it's a regular artist who's playing their normal stuff that's not drum and bass, it's a really nice thing to sprinkle into the set. But when we had an artist on one year who was one episode, and he was just like, how many drum and bass songs before it becomes too much? And we're like, I would say maybe 2 in a row max, or in the full set 2 to 3, or go back and forth with it, because I know Excision recently he's been doing drum and bass and then dubstep and then some melodic and then back to drum and bass.
See, I feel like that's the move. that's the best move is like you
Mixing
don't.
it.
Yeah, like it's like what our friend Grayson said is like you aren't the genre. That is
Right.
the music you make is just yours. So like your set can be like dubstep, drum and bass, melodic dubstep, like whatever you need to give it a full energy, full like roller coaster ride of story. Otherwise, it's just like all the same. Not to say it's a bad thing if it's all the same, but it's definitely a lot more enjoyable when you have like a whole like variety of spices.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the key to, I think, a good artist is like reading what the crowd wants and knowing when to switch it up. So,
Yeah. Do you listen to any drum and bass?
I will get into it if it's playing. Like I said, it's kind of a fixture, and it also depends on the time of day. There can be a point where it's a little too aggressive for the vibe.
That's fair.
But when it's like the right moment, it can be really sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's like your genre of choice?
Okay, so I was reading this article that said like the music you listen to in like your formative years when you just kind of get welcomed into a scene, it's really hard for you to get past that phase, and it's really hard. The brain like doesn't take well to learning new music. Like the older you get, the harder it becomes for you to like welcome new music. So I always find myself turning to like the old fixtures, like Ivy Lab will always be good. Like anything Ivy Lab puts out is guaranteed to like resonate with me. I feel like because I'm in LA, I have to give a shout out to Anna Morgan. She's from around this area. She plays Bass Coast a lot. She's really good. So I tend to vibe towards like deeper 140, like anything off Deep Medi, like darker and slower, but I'm not like anchored to it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, you sound like my dad. My dad is really into like deep. No, sorry, not to.
I have to go.
I said you sound like him in terms of the music, but
music choice.
didn't let me finish my thought. No, my dad is.
Shame on you, Dad.
My dad has
Safety
been.
daddy.
I know. Look, I'm already outing myself. Look at that. No, my dad listens to like deep house, chill, like anything that's like chiller, on the lower spectrum of like 120.
Yeah.
And and it's because he likes to go running in the mornings. He lives next to the beach, and when he runs, he likes to listen to deep house, and he's like a big fan of Deadmau5. He loves Nora and Pure, Polar Ink. So yeah, just some like more chilled out
I'll take
vibes.
it then. I retract my being offended.
Okay, let's go.
What you said makes sense too, with the whole like your brain gets attached to like what you're introduced to. Because for me, it was punk rock, like alternative punk rock, like Blink-182, Yellow Card, like the whole Vans Warped Tour kind of energy. So now that like some artists I've noticed lately have been like getting that kind of like punk energy into their music, I'm like,
oh yeah, like the screamo, like Under Oath to heavy dubstep pipeline is real for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all those songs make me super nostalgic. I used to listen to a lot of that in middle school, and so I think that's why I gravitated towards EDM so much too, is just because there's so many similarities.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Has Good Night Out ever like set up at a festival? Is it more of like an online organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do it's really hard for it because we have to, we're a Canadian organization, so the logistics around doing at event boothing in America is a little more complicated, because we have to have a visa to work. But in Canada, it's very common to see us at events with like a kind of obnoxious but really cute like pink tent, as well as a wandering team. So they'll wear like pink backpacks and shirts and just kind of wander the crowd and check in with people.
Nice.
But part of what we do offer is like a chill zone. So you can come and hang out and ask questions and
I feel like your organization is similar to like Ground Control.
Yeah, similar. We do particularly have a gender-based violence or SA awareness lens. Okay. Because of my background in harm reduction, that element spills over. But it is a kind of unique lens of looking for people just respecting each other's space and doing bystander intervention and stuff like that. Yeah.
Bystander intervention. That sounds. Can you explain more about bystander intervention?
Yeah. Do we want to get into it now?
Yeah. I feel like that's something important.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So bystander intervention, other than one day waking up and things like sexism or racism or transphobia or homophobia not existing, bystander intervention is one of the best tools we have to interrupt power-based violence. But it's not something we're like inherently know how to do. It's a skill you have to learn, just like riding a bike or anything else. And it is the ability to recognize and then insert yourself comfortably and safely into a situation. And so when people hear that, a lot of them automatically are like, I hate confrontation. Yeah. I am really shy. I could never do that. There is a way to do bystander intervention that works with your personality type. So lots of organizations teach this. They sometimes call it like the 5D or the 6D, or there's a variety of number of kind of approaches. We kind of use a 5D. So the first option is detect. So let's like do this right now. How would you know that someone was uncomfortable at a show? Like, what would you see?
I feel like I would see a person and maybe like physical discomfort, whether it's in their face or maybe like seeing them show like discomfort toward another person, trying to get away from another person. Like I would imagine it's not going to be like upright running and screaming. I mean, if that it is, that's easy to detect, but something simple as just like
earlier.
Like pushing away from someone or trying to get around someone, or like if you notice someone, like why are they going back and forth? Like why is someone like looking at someone from across the room, or like their body language, like looking at their body language.
Yeah, it's so easy at shows to get into our own zone and like not pay attention to the people around us because you're really connecting with the music. Yeah. But it's really important to try just every few minutes, just like look around you and even say like, hey, how you doing? This is awesome, right? Yeah. And the most common response to someone being targeted is like an evasive maneuver. So like trying to like get away or move somewhere else in the crowd, or like humans behave pretty predictably when there's something uncomfortable around us. We try to like put a barrier between us and the uncomfortable thing, where that's making us like small, pulling away, might get out our phone and be like, hey, don't talk to me. Like clearly I'm busy. So any of those things, not guaranteed, because we know people are neurodivergent, people behave differently in crowds. But my general rule of thumb is if something causes you to do a double take, like, oh, that's weird. It's worth paying attention to. Yeah. Or like getting a friend and be like, what's your take on this situation? Like, how do you see it? Especially if like substances are involved, that can obviously alter how you're perceiving things. So like bring someone else in. So that's the detect. The next D is direct. So this isn't for everyone, but direct means directly communicating either with the person you think is the target or the aggressor. So if you're communicating with the target, it's going up to the person you think is being harassed and just, asking yes or no questions. Are you okay? Do you want to come join me and my friends? Did you want me to get security or ground control? Do you want to come refill your water bottle? And why I say yes or no questions is if they're in their own what we call trauma response, so like fight or flight or fawn, and I ask them, hey, do you need help? What's going on? That's a really big question.
It's very loaded.
They might not even know how to answer. I'm okay. And some people might take to us, okay, they're okay, and walk away when it's really like, no, something's probably going on, but I didn't ask the right question.
Plus, they don't know you either, so like their guard is way up too.
Or it might not be safe for them to get into all of the things that are going on, or especially if they're maybe like under the influence, they might not be able to retrieve the words they need. So I ask yes or no questions, and if I get a no once, if they're like, nope, I'll ask it a few different ways. And if I get 3 or 4 no's, it doesn't mean that I read it wrong, but I am going to back off and maybe like watch from a distance. I might, if there is a wandering harm reduction team, I might tell them like, hey, I could be reading this wrong, but can you keep tabs on this situation? So that's directly communicating with them. Then you have the option to communicate directly with the person you think is the aggressor, which is typically suited to someone with some degree of power or physical stature.
Like a security guard.
Or like pre-existing relationship with the person. But what you're doing when you're being direct is naming the behavior and naming what you would like to have happen. So, hey, you're making us feel uncomfortable. You're dancing a little bit too close. Can you please give us some space? Or, hey, you're making us feel harassed. Can you please stop that? If the event you're at has a code of conduct, that's like you're in. You can be like, hey, I don't know if you saw this, but this event has a code of conduct and how you're speaking to those people isn't really in line with that. So, can you change your behavior? So that's direct. Delegate is another one. It just means go get someone else. So security, ground control. Maybe you have a friend who's really good at bystander intervention. They can do it. In a group crowd, my favorite person to delegate to is their friend, the person who's being a problem. Be like, hey, I don't know if your friend knows, but they're making people feel kind of weird on the dance floor. Can you help me rein them in? And often they will help. They'll be like, oh yeah, sorry. They sometimes get a little carried away. We'll tell them. The next D is distract, which is a great one at a music festival. It's just do whatever thing you can to take the attention off the target. So cause a bit of a scene. So, you know, like at a music, at a music event, things are kind of weird anyway. So you're kind of set up to like, hey, do you want to meet my pet dinosaur? I'm going to pull them out of my backpack. Like ask a million questions. Have you seen this DJ before? I didn't know they play drum and bass. Do they always play drum and bass? Do you know where the closest porta potties are?
Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah. So the person
pull an ADHD Nand moment.
Yeah. Just like go off and get the attention off the target so they can go find their friends. You freed them up from that exchange. And then what else do we have? Another D is maybe delay. So you didn't do anything in the moment has passed. You can still check in with the person because nothing feels as bad as being at an event. Maybe like you paid a lot of money, you've been looking forward to this forever. It's one of your favorite artists. And then someone targets you in a way that feels really unsafe. And you look around and you're like, how come no one helped me? Am I wanted here? Should I leave? Am I safe? Are these people in on it? Yeah. Again, especially if people aren't sober, they can really spiral quite quickly. And so you can interrupt that by checking in with them. Be like, hey, I saw what just happened. I saw that person touch you. I'm really sorry that happened to you here. And I'm really sorry that no one did anything, but I'm here now. How can I help you now? Yeah. And that can help ground them, help them feel seen, and help them maybe get back into the moment.
That's a very comforting response.
Yeah.
You know, we actually had that a couple weeks ago at After Time at Jenna's show when we were at In-N-Out.
Oh yeah. That was a weird situation.
Yeah. So Nand and I were waiting. We went to Time Nightclub in Newport Beach to go see our friends perform. After the show, we went to In-N-Out across the street, and we were waiting for our food to come out. And there was this group of people, and this guy and his girlfriend, they like started getting into it with this group of people. And there was someone in the group that I'm not sure if they were
to what I remember, the second group of two people, the guy was being really rude to the In-N-Out employees, and the people in the first group kind of stepped up and was like, yo, you don't need to be rude. You're like, they were defending and bystander intervention and whatnot. And then it escalated. I don't know how it escalated to the point of the guy in the second group asking one of them in the first group, are you a boy or a girl, to someone who is clearly trans or dressed cross-dressing. I'm not sure. Right. I don't know their identity or any of that.
Yeah, we never know anyone's gender identity.
It was enough that like
a friend stepped in.
To be rude to say like that question. The friend immediately stepped in and was like, no, you cannot do that. You don't get to say that. You don't get to ask that.
So she gets up. Sorry, she gets up, and then this like she didn't like push him or anything, but she did get in his face. Yeah. And then he like slapped her.
Didn't he? She smacked him first. She definitely smacked him first.
She did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, for sure. She smacked him first, and then like that's when the physical altercation started.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that part, but.
So both parties were like kind of like coming at each other.
I thought that he slapped her. I didn't see her like push or slap him.
Yeah, I think you might have been talking to me because I was looking at it the whole time because it was in my eye view the whole time.
Yeah. You bring up an important point though. So like before, you should, no matter which, like if you're more of a distract person or you're more of a direct person, there's kind of some checks you should do beforehand. And one of them is a safety check. Like, is it safe for me to insert myself, and am I the safest person? Yeah. Right. If I'm coming across a situation that's like two masculine people who are like 6.5 feet tall and they're really aggro, my safety assessment might decide that like I'm not the safest person to lead that, you know? And then there's a check around, do I have permission to insert myself? Permission isn't always possible, but sometimes you can make eye contact with the person and be like, you need me to, you know, like that look, like you need help. And then there's kind of your assessing your own response. And if you're a person who does get really aggro and ready to fight, that's an assessment you have to do, right? Because you may actually be putting gasoline on the fire if when you're faced with conflict, you start screaming and slapping.
Because I was in a situation at Glendale Galleria, and I didn't know I was being followed throughout the mall, but I'm walking out, and then someone put their hand down my pants and tried to pants me. Ooh. And immediately I turned around, obviously like I've never been in that situation before, and because I didn't know how to react, I just started swinging. And my first response was, I am not going to let this man get get away. So as he's trying to run away, I start yanking him. I'm like, you're not going anywhere. He starts screaming and he's like, get off of me, like you're hurting me, get off of me. And I was like, you just SA'd me, like you're not going anywhere. And then a bystander came in and he helped me by like grabbing him, and he was able to like get me to calm down, because I was like, okay, I can't start screaming right now. I can't, like, he's already in my hands. I just need to get his information and I need to get the cops. But obviously, like, because this was my first time in the situation, I didn't know, like, I should have kept him there and called the cops. But I did get his ID, I did get his name, I did get a picture of his address and everything. So like after like I let him go and I got his information, I called the cops. But like in that moment, because I didn't know how to react, I did start screaming for a second. But like it did help me, because like, again, like I was in a public area, and like when people see like someone screaming in a public area, it's like, oh, like maybe I should help, or maybe I should come in. But it's like in those moments, sometimes like you don't know how to react.
And there's no one size fits all. So it's good to know a few options, because every situation is going to kind of be different. And you bring up another, this is why I said sometimes there's 4Ds, sometimes there's 6Ds, is document. Like even if there's situations where there's nothing else you can do, being a really good witness is still important. So it sounds like that witness stepped in, but if he didn't feel it was safe for him, he still could have maybe like filmed with his phone or
there was a recording going on.
Yeah.
So when this man put his hands in my pants, I don't know what was going on in his mind, but he was filming the whole thing. So he has evidence against himself. Wow. So immediately I was like, give me your phone. Himself. I recorded the video that he had on his phone. I deleted it. I recorded a picture of his camera roll, because his camera roll was so disturbing, and I was like, this is evidence for other cases of girls who didn't have, who couldn't like stand up for themselves, or didn't know what to do. Weren't even aware. But it's like, I feel like this is also a common thing with him, like looking on his phone, like he touches girls, records it, and keeps it for himself, and like unfortunately never got caught. Finally he did. He's serving his time, but it's like, it took how long, So it's like, it was good that someone came in and helped me kind of like calm down and, okay, what like do I do? Ground myself. What do I do? I can't just keep swinging. I can't just scream. I need to act. And then I was able to act because someone helped me and came in.
During festival season, I like to keep like a screenshot image on my phone of just different resources like sexual assault crisis lines and victim service numbers, so that if I am at an event and I see something happen, I can be like, you know what, you might get home and really want to like unpack this with someone. Are you okay if I airdrop you some resources right now, and then you kind of have them so that they can get a little bit of extra support? I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I am happy to hear it had a positive outcome. It
took 3 months, but it's okay, because I was like, of course I would never want to be in this situation again, but like now I know for the future, if I'm ever around someone, it's like keep whoever did something there, call, because in that moment, if you call and they come, they will arrest them on spot, because you're calling against someone.
I was gonna say too, with the situation with us at In-N-Out, we did do the final D, the delay, where we checked in with the girl who got slapped, and we were like, hey, are you okay? Like we saw everything that happened. Like that wasn't right of them. They shouldn't have done that. And
I think it was the third D, the one where you decide is it safe for me to like interact or not, because when they started to get a little bit more aggro in their conversation, I did think to myself, should I step into this and just like de-escalate? But as soon as the comment of, are you a boy or a girl came up, like, nope. Not safe for me anymore, because for sure someone's going to start swinging. This is going to get really aggro. People are going to start, because they were both at least 6 feet tall. I'm small. I am not 6 feet. So at that point, it's just like, as much as I would like to de-escalate this, I'm not the right person for it.
And they ended up getting the cops involved. The cops came and checked out the whole scenario. It like moved over to like one side of the parking lot. We weren't even seeing it anymore. And that girl was just sitting there with another person in their group who was, you could tell he just had too much to drink, and he was like, so she just wanted to stay with him. So we were just checking with her to make sure that she was okay.
And this is why like having a wide variety of bystander intervention skills is really important, because we also know that in some situations calling police can make matters worse, right? We know that some communities are disproportionately harmed by police violence, and so being able to diffuse things, and don't get me wrong, there are definitely situations where police need to be involved, but having the skills to de-escalate within community is a really important and valuable skill.
Yeah, and I think it also just helps to like not to avoid like causing a scene, because sometimes like in certain cases, whether you're at like an event or something, sometimes it's best to just not cause that scene, because it could affect people like who are also, you know, on stuff or whatever. Say take a festival, you know, for example, like all of a sudden cops get involved and the cops are there, then other people who are like on stuff are going to be like,
not even just them, even the people who are involved in the situation. There's like, I can't like this.
But that leads me to a question. And then let's say if that situation that happened to me happened at a festival, am I not supposed to act out? And am I not supposed to hit and scream? You know, because like who would have helped me?
Yeah.
Who would have helped me? You know?
Yeah. I want to support you in this moment. I want to like
I just a question. Like, what would I do if I was like at a festival? Like, yes, I understand people are on things, but it's like, at what cost is like my safety less of like their experience?
Yeah, no,
I think you're completely valid and allowed to create a scene, because that goes back to the 4 or 5 Ds. Distraction. You can make a scene, call for help, attack other people.
That's why it just brought a question, because like I understand like, the validity in that, but it's like then like what would I do?
If I understood Devin correctly, it was like sometimes bringing like you're right in that sometimes seeing a traumatic thing, but the only way security or event staff can do anything about it is if it happens in the moment. I've been working so many events where people will be like, I don't want to make a big deal about it. I'll just swallow it down and tolerate it.
But I'm not about that. I'm going to do something. That's me. Like I am going to do something.
And I think in a case you spared, let's pretend that happened at a festival, you would have spared it happening to other people. And I think, you know, having worked events, people, the sooner we can hear about things, the quicker we can correct them. And so through whatever means possible, you speaking up in that moment would have made it way easier to deal with it, rather than I sometimes will get emails after an event and be like, hey, I just wanted to let you know this really like disgusting thing happened to me, and I think it's important to pass on. And every time I get one of those emails, it breaks my heart, because had you told me or another person working the event in the moment, we could have corrected it there. So that it didn't happen again, and you could move through the rest of the event knowing that perpetrator was dealt with. So I think there is value in doing what feels right for you in the time and in the moment. It felt right and safest, and look at what it led to.
Thank you.
I don't know how much you know about trauma responses, but they are really based on, you know, our childhood, our support networks, our generational trauma that we carry, our memories, all of these things have resulted in everyone having a really unique way to responding to threats in our environment. And trauma responses are very important. They have served to keep us alive. Right? So you can't, sometimes after you respond a certain way, you might feel, you know, shame or regret or like doubt, did I do the right thing? Or I'm so embarrassed. But an important tool to switch that narrative is my body was trying to keep me alive in that moment. And I have to honor it and thank it for doing that, because it did exactly what it's supposed to do.
The reference that I was just going to use is just like, it's kind of like not exactly alike, but phone thieves. You see someone stealing phones, you could just like, no, I didn't see that. Like, it's fine. Well, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep stealing more phones and whatnot. But if something is said sooner, it's like how we always say, see something, say something. See something, say something. And this involves like, you know, if you see someone stealing, you see a potential sexual assault occurring, or maybe someone's uncomfortable, or maybe drug overdose, what have you. Like, it's someone told me a story about Plur recently, and like I don't know if I talked about this in the last episode or the next episode or whatever, but the original reason why Plur came into existence 20 years ago, that's a random number I just threw in, but long ago, was because people were being found dead. Like people weren't waking up
at
like festivals, like, you know. So now Plur came into existence because it's just like we need to be taking care of our fellow man, and that isn't just in regards to like drug use and like stuff like that. It's taking care of our fellow men, fellow women, seeing if everyone's comfortable, taken care of, having a safe time, having a good time, and not you know, being attacked in any way, shape, or form, whether it be theft, sexual assault, or drugs.
Yeah, and I think also just holding each other accountable for stuff. I don't know if anyone if anyone had anything more to say about this, because I think that's a good actual transition into, I think obviously what I wanted to talk about, which is everything that happened and everything that was said on our episode on Bassnectar. But before I go into that, I don't know if anyone else had.
Not off the top of my head. I mean, anything else I could bring up later, but I think this is important for us to talk about. And it's one of the reasons why we're even here right now.
Yeah. So on the topic of accountability, well, first I think I just and even just after seeing your reaction to that, I've heard a lot of your guys' comments and everything in the last month since we released that episode. And I wanted to thank a lot of the people who held me accountable for what I had said. I do realize, especially now, with the way that you just reacted, I could see how that's a really tough subject for people to hear and to listen. And so
the thing too is and I've noticed this not just in you, but in a lot of other people, if you've never had that experience or you've never seen reactions like that, you don't quite understand how having a conversation about this stuff can trigger to that degree.
Yeah. And well, to Stacey's point earlier about everyone's, neurodivergent, it's also just we each handle things differently. And so there's no right or wrong way to handle something, everyone's going to do it in their own way. We talked about it earlier.
That's what I mean is we only know our own way. So
exactly. Yeah.
So if we speak on how we process something or how we might perceive something, it might hurt other people, unfortunately.
Right. And and because we talked about it earlier. I told Stacey about this too, but I didn't even realize before that I've been, and I'm not making this up. This is an actual thing that happened, and I had completely just blocked it out of my memory. But I've actually been essayed as well in college. I was at a bar. I was sober. I went to go pick up my friends that night. I think it was Baja Sharkies in Pacific Beach when I went to San Diego for college. And I was at a bar. It was really crowded. And this girl ran up to me and my roommate and grabbed our crotch, squeezed, and ran.
Yeah.
And it was so crowded that I didn't know where she went. And I just remember being really pissed off in the moment. Well, first I was really confused. And then I was really pissed off because I was just what just happened? And to think that someone could do that and think they can get away with it was just, I don't know, it just pissed me off so much. And I think because it happened to me and my roommate at the same time, we kind of I don't want to say brushed it off, but we kind of were just that just happened. Wow, I can't believe that just happened. But I think that's without going too into detail about it now, because I think this is something that I also want to talk about later, which is what sexual assault looks like for men too.
I was actually about to touch on that as a thought too. It's just we don't know what it looks like that. Because you were saying your shirt has a stain at the bottom. I'm sorry, I can't stop.
Oh no, it's a piece of lint.
But dang, I just lost my thought because of that.
I have a couple questions that perhaps you could save it for later on, because I have a couple questions on that topic. So if you want to continue.
Oh, I got it. I remember now. Brushing off. It's because you're saying, I brushed it off, blah, blah, blah. It's when you think about it, can I at least speak for myself? If someone were to do that to me, I don't know if I'm brushing it off per se. It's just I didn't even know that was sexual assault. You know what I mean? In my mind, I was oh, that hurt. Take boys being boys when they're kids, nut tapping each other. Technically, is that sexual assault, or is that just boys playing a prank on each? You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
As a guy, we kind of get conditioned to just especially if you're on a sports team, guys slap each other's ass, it's no big deal, But or to someone, it could be
EDC 2021. When that guy came up and just smacked you on the body?
There was a guy who, we were just standing waiting for our friends, and a guy, I didn't know him. He just came and slapped me really hard on my abs, and he was nice physique or something like that. Yeah. I don't know, nice abs. I remember, and then he just walked away, and I was just what just happened?
I remember you and I looked at each other just thinking that's not okay.
Is that okay? Right? Yeah, we were questioning
but
it.
At no point after that did we think, that was sexual assault.
Right.
We just kept thinking that's not okay. You can't just hit somebody like that. You can't touch somebody like that. But it never occurred that could be considered an essay moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get into the teachy part now. I do have, I might file that away for later. I do have some thoughts around that, but the short answer is yes, like your consent was violated. I think due to how we have made masculinity in society as like men are tough. Men are the initiators of sex. Men don't have boundaries. It makes it hard for men to even recognize that they're allowed to have boundaries or that they have been violated. Yeah.
I think the line gets very blurred sometimes, and I think just bringing it back to like the original topic, I think because of that, it's like, you know, I can never fully understand what another person might feel from something that I say, and so like for, you know, part of that reason, like I am extremely sorry that I did hurt some of you guys out there who heard what I said. And again, I do want to reiterate that I in no way support Bassnectar, and I in absolutely no way support sexual assault. Sorry, trigger warning. I don't know if I should have said that before.
We said at the beginning of the episode.
Okay, yeah. But I could have done was I could have done a lot more research, and thank you for sending me all the resources and articles. The Vice article, I read Mimi Page's Tumblr post. Mm-hmm. I read the court documents, and so I think had I had read those beforehand and fully understood the trauma that some of these people have really gone through in detail, then I wouldn't have said that, because and for me to just kind of like brush it off like that was not right. And so I do want to say that, like, when it comes to stuff like that, I do feel like what I've learned is you just have to understand that everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own thought process, and so just, you know, we want to make sure that we are being respectful to that. And so
I will also take responsibility too, because I didn't do my research.
Like,
you know,
none of us did.
None of us did. Like, as you were saying those things, in my mind, I could have spoken up. I could have said something had I known more research, had I known more information. Because, like, I'd seen some of the evidence. I know how I feel about it all. But when it all came up, it's just like, is that right?
Yeah, if I would have read that Vice article, it would have been a little bit different.
Yeah, I probably would have stood my ground more. Yeah. And I think that's something I'm taking responsibility for that. It's like, I could have done more research myself, so we could have avoided hurting people. Yeah,
I think too, like, what I had said, it was such a like general blanket statement that was applied to something that is so that has already been proven so not that way. You know, like if this had like just happened and like no one had really gathered evidence or anything, like where I was coming from was more of a place of like fairness for both parties, right? Like, I think that, you know, it should be fair. Like, it shouldn't just be completely one-sided, but if there's already enough like legitimate evidence and everything that's already out, then, you know, we need to adhere to those things, right?
I agree with that.
There was someone who said it. There's the absolute truth, and then there's the legal truth. There's two different things.
Yeah.
Well, and we have to remember that most sexual assault is something that happens in private. Right?
Yeah.
So this idea that there's like an objective things, you know, proof, like, this is why sexual assault is so hard to prosecute, and why it rarely results in, you know, felony charges, is because it is something that happens in private.
Right.
I have more to say on that, but we'll also table that. I think that it's important to acknowledge that getting good at consent also includes getting good at ownership and accountability. And I think what you're demonstrating now is ownership and accountability, and that's really important. And I think also the awareness of the idea of impact over intent. And your intent wasn't to harm anyone with those comments, but I can see in you a realization that having a platform means that your words have impact.
Yeah.
Everything is scaled to like such more of a degree.
Impact's such a good word.
Yeah.
You're like, because I've always said this before with other scenarios outside of this, within my own life, of like, intention is what matters. Intention is what matters.
Yeah.
But yes, my intention might have been this, but I have to recognize the impact of what they perceived, what they felt when I did whatever it is I did. I have to take responsibility and I have to own up to the impact. Hopefully there's an understanding of my intent wasn't to create that impact, but it still happened.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I know it's like a very irresponsible thought, but like we are new to this. And like sometimes we do forget we have that impact.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you pay attention to the positive, not the negative, you know, like we talk about the positive impact we have all the time. This is probably one of the first real big negative impacts. And it's just like, look, if we're going to accept the positive impact we have, we better accept the negative one so that we can also learn to not do that.
Which we have learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to be completely transparent with everything that I did during that process too. I know a lot of people have made comments too about the comments that I made right after it had happened, defending what I had said and saying that I stood by what I said. And again, I think this was all before I had actually taken the time to really look through the actual evidence and stuff. So I was still very much in my own head and I was being very stubborn about that. And for that, I've learned, like, you know, I need to like listen to other people. And so for those comments specifically, like, again, I'm sorry about making those two. And I'm sorry for being so stubborn on my blanket statement. And then in regards to my apology video as well, I know a lot of people were talking about how I had taken it down on TikTok. And for full disclosure, I took it down on TikTok because I think just the comments were when the comments started flooding in, especially the ones that were attacking me very harshly, it was starting to have like a negative effect on my mental health and on my mental state. And I kind of just felt like backed into a corner. Again, not making an excuse for that. But I do, like I said, I just want to be transparent on everything that transpired from then to now. But I do want to make it again very apparent that I did listen. I did listen and I read your guys' comments and I hear you. And
thank you.
Yeah.
It's not easy to apologize and you know, shame is a powerful motivator, and I don't always think in the best kind of way. And it sounds to me like you did. Like, this is the thing that sometimes the internet doesn't always realize, is that humans are extremely flawed. Like, we are wired to make mistakes. We are not perfect beings. And I believe that a true consent culture also includes, instead of people hanging people out to dry when they make mistakes, having, you know, imagine a world where we have more people in our corner when we fuck up. Like, that is going to, I think, produce more change than relentless dogpiling and shaming on people. I think there is space for things like call outs, definitely, as like, you know, warning signs. But I just imagine a different world where like, oh, you don't fully understand this thing. I have the resources and the capacity to share my knowledge with you. That's where we're really going to move the needle to like a safer community. Yeah.
And I think it's in your failures and your mistakes that you learn the most, right? Rather than if you were just perfect all the time, you wouldn't necessarily learn to the degree that when you fail, right?
Yeah, and it kind of creates like a hierarchy. Like everyone has committed, I promise you, a consent violation at some point in your life. And when I say consent violation, I'm not even talking about things necessarily of a sexual nature. We have all violated someone's boundaries in our lives, and we probably will again. And so this idea that you have to be perfect in order to engage in this conversation keeps a lot of people out of it. This is how we open Good Night Out workshops, is saying like, you do not have to be perfect to participate in this conversation. Sometimes the fear of like, oh, do I even know enough to attend a workshop on SA prevention? I don't think I do. I don't want to look stupid. And so they won't even open up the door to learning because they're scared that they don't know enough. And I think, you know, the consent education in North American schools is extremely poor.
It's non-existent.
Like consent literacy is so low that we can't expect people, unless they, you know, seek it out or are surrounded by people, to automatically know all of these things.
Sorry, I just feel like it's kind of like a big boulder on my shoulders kind of been being lifted a little bit, but thank you so much for those words again, because it has been eating away at me for the last month. We did have some questions though for you. I know since we were talking about the whole males and what sexual assault looks like for males, I guess we can start with that first. I know you had tabled some of your comments for that.
Yeah. So I think the first thing right out of the gate is that any person a person of any gender can perpetuate sexual violence, and any person can be victimized, right? Yeah. There are a lot of myths in our society about how SA happens, and one of the myths is that it's something of masculine, identifying people do to women. And yes, women and femmes do make up the largest, number-wise volume of people who are victimized. But that is not the only way it looks. Yeah. Okay. So, when we're talking about SA in a really general sense, it's any conduct of a sexual nature that someone is not open to and welcoming to. And so that means that it can happen, men essaying other men, even if it's not their intent. It can be harder for the crowd or the people around or your friend group to see it that way because of those myths that are kind of prevalent in our society. I think most young women are socialized to believe that if we are going to be essayed, it'll be like the stranger danger type of situation. Whereas it's most often happens by someone we know, someone in our circle, someone we do trust. So yes, it can happen to men. But like I said earlier, because of how we've made masculinity in our society, it can be hard for you to even recognize it or that you're allowed to say no. I read something recently that kind of introduced the idea that for many young men, their first sexual experience isn't fully consensual. They just feel like they can't say no or that they're not ready.
Yeah, especially when it comes to young men or being like a teenager, and in the years where you start to get into not the ideal years, but the age where guys are expected to lose their virginity. And
you're still coming.
You were talking. About
I brought this up the other day because it's portrayed in media, articles, books, the whole some men might have their first sexual experience and it might not be what they wanted or even great, or it could be unconsensual, and then all their friends are like, "Oh, you got some? You're so lucky." And it's now it's wait, am I supposed to have liked it? And then now there's this misinterpretation within your own mind, and it's just getting shrugged off as oh, I guess I got some. It's no big deal. Then you see it as a win, a positive, when in reality it's just I didn't like that experience, but I don't know how to explain that to all the men who apparently would give anything to have had that experience.
And then it's compounded by the fact that who can you tell? Who's going to take you seriously, because the dominant narrative in society is that men can't be sexually assaulted. The byproduct is that it's not super safe for men to be actually I didn't want that, or actually that violated my boundaries and I felt unsafe. There is already a vast shortage of supports for survivors of SA. And there are even dismal, less supports for folks on the masculine end of the spectrum.
I think especially and this, I think this is actually a great transition into another question we had, which is because I think in college this becomes a very apparent thing when people are partying all the time and people are drinking, and they end up in situations where they are intoxicated and not making the best decisions. So I think one of the biggest questions we had was, actually, I'm going to refer to my notes here
get it.
so that I ask the rightly worded question. But it was...
And the lead in information too. Remember we talked about this.
So, where is it? Yes. So, can consensual sex with regret post-coitus be considered sexual assault?
This is a really great question. Because we do say, consent is reversible. You can say no at any time. Of course, the limits on that are up until it happens. And so whenever I hear stuff like this, it reminds me how very separated people are from the law. Like the law, like for 7 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults actually result in felony charges. And so let's do some math. So in America, there are about 400,000 reported cases of sexual assault a year. So the key word in that phrase is reported. We know that about 1 in 5 are actually reported, right? So there are hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions, of sexual assaults happening every year. Of those that are reported, 7 out of every 1,000 results in a felony charge. That's like dismal, right? Yeah. And so for those charges to stick, for the prosecution to go that way, it's not based on feelings, right? A judgment of someone being found guilty of sexual assault is not because someone felt a sense of regret, right? Like prosecutions happen because of, being able to prove, should a person have been aware that someone was saying no or was unable to consent. So I struggle with kind of this idea that, like, the idea of regret sex or things like that. Is it possible? Is it in the realm of possibility for people to make allegations because they regret something? Yes, that is a possible thing. But, does it meet the criteria for sexual assault? No. But that opens the door for another term I like to use, which is, consent violation. Consent violation is sometimes sexual assault, but not always, right? So, if you consented under the conditions that maybe this was going to lead to a relationship and you'd hang out again, and, though that was the dialogue before hooking up with someone, and then you wake up and it's a very different situation. The person won't return your text. You do feel as if your consent was violated because you agreed to something on different terms. And so there is this kind of realm of, is it possible that a person is negatively impacted and feels misled and does feel that their consent was violated? Yes, and that's very real. But then what kind of is maybe up for debate is was it sexual assault? Right. But I think in my version of a consent culture, we're not just doing a shave above legal. Like, Lord help us if our sexual relationships, the best we can say about them is, well, they weren't illegal. Right. And this is something I see in comments whenever an artist gets called out, is like, well, I don't get it. He wasn't breaking the law. That is a very low bar. Right. And so I think the way to avoid this idea of, like, and it is often very gendered, like, oh, she just regretted it after, so she called it sexual assault, is to be aiming for much higher than legal consent, and instead be aiming for something that we call ethical consent. And that just creates like a safer terrain. But to answer your question, like, does it happen? Do people feel that way? Yes, they do. But it's often due to just not talking enough.
Not enough communication.
Yeah. Did you have a comment on that?
I'm trying to figure out the words right now because I lost it in my brain.
Was it to do with sobriety? I feel like we were heading in a direction.
Yes, that's what it was. Sobriety. So, like, it brings in that question of, like, say, two people are inebriated in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they black out, and both of them don't remember, and there's a sense of regret afterwards. Like, I can be transparent for myself. I personally will never engage in a sexual act if my partner is also inebriated, but when I say never, it has happened before, because I'm also inebriated, and I feel like both of us are, we're already in a relationship. That, I guess that's where the, what was the word you just used?
Consent violation.
Consent violation in the whole, we're in a relationship. So there's an agreement that, like, I'm safe to engage in this sexual act because, I know you want to, and I know I want to. There's, like, already a pre-made consent form.
Not consent form, but like agreement, like an implied consent. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I feel like this could be its own episode, is the intersection of intoxication or drugs and consent. I love talking about this, and I think we already don't talk about consent enough. This particular corner of consent is, like, very lacking. People are scared to approach this topic. So some things I have to say around this are, is it possible to have consensual interactions with people while intoxicated? Yes, I do believe that it's possible, but it is done with a lot of care and a lot of communication.
Yeah.
And it does come with a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And so if it's a stranger, like you just met them at an event, that risk is way
really
more
high.
significant than your long-term partner.
Yeah.
Right? So some tips for navigating this are, one, this is where harm reduction, this is where organizations like Dance Safe are so important, is really, really knowing the substances that you and the other person have taken and how they impact you, right? So a very popular drug, I think, in our scene is ketamine. It is really important that someone researches all about ketamine and understands how the effects of ketamine could impact my ability to misread signals in other people. We know that the main kind of enjoyable feature of why people choose ketamine is because it kind of disconnects you from your environment.
Yeah.
That's important to be aware of, because that disconnection may mean that I might miss signals that someone I am connecting with is actually telling me no. Right? So one, really, really strong harm reduction knowledge. Two, understanding what your state laws say about consent under the influence. There are some states that say like no one can be any level of intoxicated. So knowing what your law says, whereas a lot of laws say incapacitated. Well, what does incapacitated look like? Let's do a little round. How would you know someone's incapacitated?
Say eyes rolling back, perhaps, like they're not responsive, or
word slurring.
Yeah.
That's so hard. That's honest, because like, I mean, I feel like I've been in that position before. Like, to be transparent, I've been, on the effects of MDMA, and I'm like rolling pre-workout. I've been
we call it pre-workout.
I've been on the effects of pre-workout, and like, I'm feeling a type of way. And I'm not exactly the most responsive. And, I've engaged in like, maybe making out with somebody or dancing with somebody because it's enjoyable, you know, like, so was I incapacitated or was I not? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
But like inside my brain, I'm like, yeah, I give consent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we would all have something different to add. And this is where it becomes a little bit dicey, because what is incapacitated? I know that people have been blackout, even drunk before that I've been with, but still walking and talking, right? Yeah. So it's a subjective experience. So my rule of thumb for intoxicated or for incapacitated is if maybe you've been parked at a stage for a while, you and your group are getting up to move to another stage, and there's someone in the group who needs an adult. There is no way they're going to get across the festival grounds on their own. Their bag is flailing. They can't get their coat on, they're trying to text.
We've all been there.
That is incapacitated. If they need an adult to give them assistance with things they don't normally need, right? Yeah. So understanding what the law says. And then there's this element of emotional safety. Is this someone I have emotional safety with, or is this a new person whose body language I don't know? We don't have rapport. I don't know how well they tolerate things at a festival. That also comes into play. The less emotional safety is, the higher the stakes are with this, right? And then there's really like 3 layers. This is something that I got from my colleagues at Dance Safe. We talk about this a lot. Is there's 3 layers to consent to hooking up while on substances. 1, there is the consent to take the substances. Right. So if I was like, oh, this is A, but secretly it's substance B, I'm not being honest with you about what you just took. That first layer is nullified. Or if like their drink is spiked, that very foundational, they did not consent to take. Yeah. Another way this often happens is like them saying like, I don't want to get too drunk tonight. And then the person who's making them drinks makes them doubles instead of singles.
Oh yeah, that's not
that's removing that foundational layer of consent. So there's consent to take substances. And then there's consent to be touched, just in general, consent to be physical.
Right.
Then the third layer is, then there's consent to be touched while under the influence of whatever substance. And all of those 3 layers need to be really talked about and communicated and solidified in order for this to be a safe activity. But we're not really taught that, one, because there's so much stigma around drugs and alcohol in general, or drugs at least that aren't alcohol. And two, we're kind of taught that's assuming. Like, imagine, I think it's a really common Tinder date to like meet someone off of Tinder, go crush beers, and maybe hook up.
Yeah.
Rom-coms and like pop culture don't show us negotiating like, hey, I'm really vibing with you. I'm feeling really good. Before we finish this first round of drinks, I think we should maybe talk about what you were feeling or what your expectations were, right? Like, we're taught that that's like too forward and assuming. Yeah. And what if the person I'm out with is like, I'm totally vibing too, I'm having a great time, but as a general rule of thumb, I don't like to hook up the first time I'm hanging out with someone. Sweet, thanks totally for letting
valid.
me know.
Yeah.
Let's keep drinking. Like, now I know I won't be confused. I won't push up against your boundaries, right? So there's these 3 layers. And with someone we just met, if we, it's like starting a video game you've never played on hardest mode, right? Like, to get those 3 layers. It comes with a lot of risk. Whereas your partner of a long time that you kind of have referenced circumstances, he was like, you already have a bit of those layers, but so there's less risk for you to do that.
My question for that is, can the first layer, or I'm sorry, what you just said, rule of thumb, I don't hook up on the first date. Or the first time I hang out with someone. Okay, cool. We keep drinking. We keep having a good time. That comment now changes to maybe they're making physical moves.
Yeah. Because if people are allowed to change their mind to a no, then the possibility is there that they are allowed to change their mind to a yes, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I might get on a bit of a tangent, but I promise I'll correct ourselves. So this is why our understanding of consent needs to broaden. I think most of us, if I were to ask you, like, what is consent? Like, how would you explain it right now?
I would say consent is you asking me if I'm comfortable with doing something and me telling you yes or no.
Yeah. So getting a yes or no. What about this side?
It's like a sense of permission of like, do like a verbal consent. Sometimes like it can be a nonverbal consent of like for example, a hug. Yeah. Like giving someone a hug or I don't know how to explain it, but I usually go with the verbal question of like, are you comfortable with me like being this close to you? Is it okay if I dance with you? Just trying to make sure that there's a sense of, you're safe. One, you're safe and you're comfortable by me asking, and so that I know that I'm safe to do these things so that I feel comfortable even dancing with you. Yeah. So it's like not just consent for them, it's also consent for myself.
Yes, amazing. Yeah. So most like people, when they explain consent, they talk about permission, they talk about yes means yes. They say things that are like kind of related to the legal version. Like, did the person say yes? Is the person incapacitated? We want to make sure people aren't a minor, right? We want to make sure that they're of legal age, and we want to make sure that we're maybe not abusing power. So that's like the legal version of consent. Again, that is the lowest possible bar that humans should be aiming for, right? So then we have this idea of ethical consent, which is who has more power? Is that person sharing power? Do people have all the information they need? Like, okay, we're going to hook up. Like, whose house are we going to go to? What neighborhood do you live in? Are you are you single? Are you in an open relationship? Like, tell me all the things I know. Have I given space to ask all of the questions that I need to? What role do substances play into this? Is everyone having fun? Is everyone feeling safe? How am I going to check in after? What does this mean for tomorrow? And so like, that's ethical consent. And so in that situation, you meet someone at a party, really vibing, earlier in the night, they're like, yeah, I'm having fun with you, but just so you know, like, I generally don't like to hook up. But then the evening progresses and it's like, you know what, I think I'd be okay coming back to your house. Not just taking that yes at face value, but instead, okay, like your house or my house, like what, do you have any boundaries around this? Are you going to spend the night? Like, not just being like, oh, well, they said yes, right?
Yeah. Communicating with their friends. Hey, here's my number. If you, and want to like get in contact with one, I'll make sure she gets home, et cetera, et cetera.
I think just taking into consideration the first initial response, which was them going out of their way to say like, hey, look, I usually don't do this and everything. And so I think it's,
And it's also a big marker for me is who initiated the change of mind. Like, if they said earlier, like, no, I don't hook up, and then you ask again, knowing that they had earlier said no, that doesn't feel right to me. Whereas a person being like, you know what, I'm kind of reconsidering what I said earlier. I'm having a really good time. Can we maybe talk about what it would look like if we did spend the night together? Like that also comes into play, is who initiated that change of mind.
Then let me ask, because I want to make sure, because I've been in a situation like that, and I want to make sure I didn't do anything inappropriate. Then I've definitely been, at a festival, met a girl, we were vibing, had a good time. I asked if she wanted to come back with me. She said no. She's like, I kind of want to, but I don't think it'd be a good idea, blah, blah, blah. We continue having a good time. And then I asked one last time before we're leaving, like, well, I want to be respectful to what you said, but I would love if you came over with me, or I can go with you. I asked one more time, and I prefaced it by saying I want to be respectful of your earlier decision, but like, I really do want to keep seeing you tonight. Yeah. And she was hesitant. I could tell she wanted to say yes, but she did end up saying no. And, she went home, I went home. But I do wonder, if that had gone her coming with me, or I go with her, would that have been me manipulating her into changing her mind?
I think this is why, like, ethical consent, it's like a continuous process. So you got that initial yes. She was like, okay, yeah, I have changed my mind. Then, like we said, like, do you want to let your friends know, like, that you're going to be with me? And then you get back to wherever it is you're going and be like, I just want to let you know, if you change your mind at any time, I'll walk you back, or I'll get you your Uber or whatever it is.
So it's really keeping open the conversation of like all the factors of everything. It's like, hey, here's this, that. It's not just like, come back with me right now.
Yeah, like I got a yes, which is why we go beyond legal consent, because legal consent is like, well, I got a yes, I don't need to talk anymore. And that ethical consent is continuous. Do you
Safety,
consent?
Comfort.
Yeah, to this activity, to this activity. Where is your bound? Like, is there anything you don't want to do if we do go home together?
Yeah. You essentially like you like help create an atmosphere that is comfortable for them, and also like to your point about like, if you wanted to go home at any time, it's kind of like, I don't want to call it an escape route, but it is like you're creating an easy escape route in case they did at any point feel that way.
I think instead of escape route, it's like you're allowing them to understand you're safe.
Yeah.
Like this is the whole everything. Right. This is the entire environment. It's not like, oh, you're coming with me and there's only one direction you can go. It's like, no, I want you to feel comfortable. If you want to come with me, I want to allow that. But here's all these other factors to make sure you feel taken care of, your friends feel taken care of. Like, I'm a stranger you just met. I want you to know that you're safe in all
capacities.
Yeah. And then I think it even extends into the next day. Like, I think there's a term like aftercare, which is commonly associated with maybe like BDSM and kink stuff, but like aftercare is for everyone. So like, maybe you never were gonna, it was just a casual hookup, but checking in after and be like, hey, I just want to let you know I had a nice time. Anything I could have done to make you feel safer or anything like that. Like, I don't know what you want to have come from this, but just to let you know, I'm open to talking again or hanging out again or things like that.
Yeah, that's so important too, because like I feel like it's such a thing that like our society has created, where you see it more commonly with dudes like ghosting like a girl the next day and everything, and I think it is really important to communicate and still check in with that person, especially if it's someone that you don't commonly have this kind of interaction with, because
you want to make people feel safe and comfortable. You don't want them to feel like, oh, I was violated in the sense that like 100%. I thought this was something and now it's nothing, and it's like you just got what you wanted and you're gone.
And it is possible, I think, due to how we've like created masculinity, the assumption is that you can't have casual sex and still be respectful, and like the opposite is true. It's still totally possible to create all of these caring, informed consent conditions, even if you never have intentions to see each other again. But it's just all about talking about that beforehand, so the person knows what they're getting into. And if they're like, you know what, I know in myself that I will feel hurt if we never talk again. This isn't for me. And in order to make myself feel safe and not project, my stuff onto you, I'm gonna decline this offer.
The communication is like it's so key.
That's for sure.
More questions.
Yes.
I'm glad we started with one of my favorites.
I'm really happy with this entire conversation, because there's a lot of things. Because you're right, I never thought about the fact that nobody wants to touch the topic of like inebriated, having sex when you're inebriated. No one wants to touch that topic. Because it's gray area, but thank you.
Just like hearing this conversation is like getting a lot of gears to turn in my head. That's why like I'm like staying quiet, because I'm just like thinking a lot.
I love you.
I love you.
Yeah, I love you.
But yeah, no, this is definitely it's both making me very. It makes me a little bit happy too to hear some of this stuff, because it's like, okay, cool, that's some stuff that I do. I just wasn't aware that was the broader ethical consent. It was just, I just think about it in the sense of like, well, I want to be comfortable. And we've had this conversation on a previous podcast about like hookup culture in festivals. It just doesn't, for people like us, where we think about, their safety, them getting home, all that. Yeah. It's not really a possible thing. It's just like, they come with their friends, I come with my friends. What I'm going to do, like take them to my place? No, I want your friends to be able to know you're safe, and know you're safe. And it's like, it's a whole ordeal. So it's like, how about I get your phone number and we talk another time?
I think in those situations, like at least for me, from my experience, even just having those kinds of relationships with people, or like with just hooking up with people, to me, the most important thing is that the other person feels comfortable, and that they're, because I feel like I tell myself I'm a very empathetic person. And so if I feel like someone is doing something that they don't really want to do, or like their heart's not all in a decision that they make, that makes me feel really uncomfortable myself. And so when I feel like the other person is uncomfortable, then it's like, I don't even want to I don't even want to go there, And so unless they like really want to do the thing, obviously if you are having like for example, a sexual interaction, if they really want to do it, then it's like, okay. But if they're even having like any doubts at all, I'm like, no, like it's just best not to even go there.
Yeah, at that point, phone number, let's talk another time.
Yeah, if there's ever any doubt, there's so many other things to do at a festival. You can revisit the connection another time. And a really good rule of thumb is, if someone is in need of a caregiver, that is not the time to propose hooking up. Like if they're so vulnerable that like you're heading back to your tent and they're like super wobbly, they need a safe place to rest, ride it out and rest. You do not need to put them more in danger by like imposing yourself. Yeah,
agreed.
Yeah.
This just reminded me of what happened at Okeechobee. What do you call it? I'm not going to name names, but the Aquaman thing, where one of our friends, completely inebriated, could barely move. I was taking care of her. 6 of our friends were all taking care of her, and there was this other person who wouldn't leave.
He kept pushing himself.
He kept pushing. It's like, look, I get what you're doing. I don't think you're doing anything inappropriate just yet, but like, bro, leave.
Yeah,
like,
and she had like just
messed up.
But there was intention. There was intention there, because like situations like that, like again, like listening to this conversation, a lot of gears are turning.
Yeah.
And it's like situations like that is where SA occurs.
Yep.
Yeah. People don't even know.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that a lot of women and femmes who go to these things like are very conscious of the fact that there are people who go to just the anonymous nature of festivals with tens of thousands of people to be predatory. Yeah. And we're just so used to being so hyper vigilant all the time. It's why other folks, especially men and masculine folks, having that awareness of like, our whole lives we've been socialized to just be so vigilant and looking over our shoulder, and so sharing that load is really, really helpful. And then also the awareness that like anytime you're in a space, 1 in 3 people have experience with sexual assault. So there are always survivors in the room, watching your comment threads, listening to your podcast, like all of the time.
Yeah.
More questions?
Do you have anything you want to ask?
No, you okay?
Yeah, I'm just listening.
I think we're gonna open a big can of worms with this conversation, but it's definitely with this question. Okay. But I know like it's definitely something that we've even talked about before, and we didn't know if we wanted to like have it public. But when it comes to a difference in status, how power dynamics and grooming play a role in the SA allegation process. And so obviously the most notable example could be the whole Bassnectar situation. But I think the reason this is such a big topic is because we've seen in media, like, producers and celebrities and film celebrities from all walks of life, like
people with power and,
use their status to, essentially, get a sexual interaction out of someone. And so I think I mean, we have a lot of. I guess we'll just start with that as the question, and then we'll kind of go into the sub questions. But
Sorry, what was the question in there?
Sorry.
Yeah. So just say the details first. Ask the question after.
When it comes to difference in status, how do power dynamics and grooming play a role? In the SA allegation process?
Yeah. So we have to remember that power is present in all of our relationships all of the time. Power dynamics are not necessarily always bad, but because of the way society is stratified, power and built around since colonialism, built around certain groups in our society carry more power, whether it's due to their ethnocultural background, their gender expression, their socioeconomic class, how much money they have. These are always present in all of our relationships. They are not always bad, right? Power dynamics can be used for good. Think about a teacher that really influenced you over the course of your childhood. Like that is an example of a power dynamic being used positively.
Right.
But the other side of that coin is that sexual violence is a form of power-based violence, which means that a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, someone abusing their power or taking advantage of another person's lack of power is a core motivator for this happening.
Right.
This doesn't mean that you should only socialize with people who are, your same age and your gender. And like that's impossible and ridiculous to think about.
Right.
But it is, what it means is that the person who maybe holds more of those power dynamics, whether it's due to their gender or their size, or they're more sober than the other person, holds the container for creating that ethical consent.
Right.
But again, due to people not having very poor consent literacy, in the case of music or, or in LA, people in film, getting to the position that they're at and holding power and never being taught how to practice ethical consent or share power or, see what they want and take it, and that being normalized. It happens. We know that.
Yeah.
We've seen this. There's a call out at least once a year, of someone with power being accused of sexual assault.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to know, on the other side of the spectrum, how can people be mindful of that too? Because I think, the topic that we had one time when we were kind of getting into this, it was when, what's the company?
Relentless Beats.
Yeah. When that whole situation happened, and we had just talked briefly a little bit off camera about how for the girls too who had gotten involved in that, how can they be mindful going in? Because the whole joke is that or I don't even know if it was a joke, but I feel like it's become a stigma that it's girls want backstage passes, and a lot of I wouldn't even call it a consensus.
I know what you mean, because it's in the film industry, people have always made the joke, because you were saying it's a joke, but not necessarily a joke, because it's not the whole backstage, people trying to get backstage passes.
It's even a song lyric.
Yeah, it's literally a song lyric. And then there's people even I know when I was growing up or first getting into LA, trying to get in the film scene, I'd have friends say oh, whose dick did you suck to get that role?
Yeah.
And then it's unfortunate because that was actually happening for a number of years for a lot of people. And Harvey Weinstein, one of the most known producers who was doing that, and I'm pretty sure he got jail time. I have no idea. He's got jail time.
Oh yeah.
So he's been prosecuted. He's in that's one of the wins that we have of he got caught up. But it's people always made those jokes, and we never thought about, wait, is it actually happening?
Yeah, but there's also females who they go into the situation without wanting to do anything with these people, but of course they want to get something from them, and then then there's situations where they're in them and then they get too fucked up, and because they were getting things from them in that moment, it's they never gave the consent, but because they were always taking and pretending they would, in those moments it's then it gets taken from them because they pretended they would,
Yeah. This is a question in working with artists that kind of comes up a lot, is what about, I feel the groupie trope has existed forever, right? Beatles, Rolling Stones, it's kind of the idea of women fans and that whole thing. And again, this is another, to me, that's a casual hookup kind of situation. And what it keeps coming down to is in that dynamic of an artist meeting the average fan, the artist holds more power. So it is on the artist to treat that situation with as much care as possible.
Yeah.
And let's be real, like a lot of them don't, or they're not taught how to, right? And I think social media has blurred the lines and made it easier for fans to access their favorite artists, which kind of complicates it because they're in a one-sided relationship. Like if you're a fan, you're watching your favorite artist's Instagram, I get to see what city you're in, where you ate, what kind of socks. So I feel like I deeply know you and I have a connection, but that artist doesn't know shit about my life, you know, because they probably don't even follow me. So it sets up these conditions. And so I think, you know, and we live in a time where, you know, folks who aren't men, you know, whether it's women or femmes or non-binary folks, are feeling more and more sexually empowered after decades of not being safe to, which is amazing and should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And you know, women should never ever be blamed for you know, being sexual beings. But I think where things get into trouble is you know, women, let's use the example of women, but we know it can be people of any gender, can maybe, you know, get backstage or get into DMs and get guest list or whatever the thing is. That still is not the same as consenting to sex. Right. Mm-hmm. Like someone could, I see this a lot, especially in America. You folks have way more all ages environments than we do in Canada. Like it's very rare for there to be 17-year-olds at an event that's liquored, you know, where there's booze being served. But so it's really common for there to be 17 or 18-year-old young women who managed to get backstage, you know, however it happened, but all of a sudden not want to be there. Like, I thought I wanted this. Mm-hmm. I thought I wanted to hang out with my favorite DJ. I thought this would be really cool. But now that I'm back here, I actually don't like it and I don't feel safe. But no one here is giving me that, what did you say earlier, escape route. Yeah. Right? There isn't the presence of ethical consent back there. And a lot of the time, the assumption from the men in power is saying yes, like, oh, you took my guest list spot. Yeah. I got you backstage. Yeah. That is consent to everything. Yep. And this is why consent is ongoing. It's specific. And it is the responsibility of the person with more power to be like, you know, thank you for coming. I'm so glad we get to hang out. I want to make sure you feel safe while we're hanging out. I'm going to introduce you to Devin. Devin's in charge of the backstage. If you ever don't want to be here, you need help with an Uber and I'm playing or whatever, you talk to Devin. Like just, you know, continually putting in the effort to help that person who has less power feel safe. Yeah.
It's on. I introducing them to all your friends too. Like say you're in a crowd, and just because I'm thinking about it like this too is like, because we do social media, there has been times where, you know, a fan might be excited to meet us and whatnot, but like, this is Brin, this is Devin, these are all my friends. It's just not just, oh, you only know me, and then like there's a power dynamic of like, you know me and I don't know you. Here's all these other people here. Yeah, and like it's often in a lot of the stories that went really public, it would be an artist giving one person a guest list pass instead of like, you know, I think you should bring a friend, you know, because I'm going to be busy. I got to go play my set. Would you like me to add one of your friends to the list? So that you can have that back here. And then, you know, if there's substances in the mix, letting that person know ahead of time, like, just so you know, it is common after the show for us to have drinks or indulge. You do not have to by any means, or you can bring your own. You're not pressured to indulge. Just like giving that person an out at every single opportunity.
Yeah, hearing that makes you feel safe. For sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because just because people consented to like doing that doesn't mean that they inherently wanted to hook up, which is one of the biggest misconceptions. Whenever there's a story on social media, there's stuff like, well, what did she expect to happen? She got the backstage pass.
That's all she wanted, nothing more. The only thing that was consented was, I want the backstage pass. Everything else is not, they're not mutually exclusive.
And we've had friends too who have like been in that situation where they like did like interact with the DJ and get taken backstage and stuff, and I just, you know, I hate to see it like like the DJs are taking advantage, not to like out all DJs, but I mean, obviously like there should be a lot more effort put into creating that safe and comfortable environment for those people.
Yeah, and if any artists are listening, we have a whole workshop on how to do that. So
because like sometimes like they don't know, so it's like it's good to know and to put in the effort to like learn how to make the people that you want to surround yourself feel comfortable. But on the topic of power, I have an example or like a story example that leads me to a question. So I know someone who he has power. It's not like power, but like he has a status, and he has like a crazy ex-girlfriend, and there's a possibility that like someone in the situation could be blackmailed, and that would be the person with the status. Now, given that if, let's say, she were to blackmail and come out and say something that's completely false, the question that I have is somewhere in the notes.
This is actually a good transition into the other question that we had.
How do we go about allegations when they first come out? Should we always believe the victim by default? Like, and that's just like given the situation.
Is the consensus, what is it, innocent before proven guilty, or is it guilty before proven innocent? Yeah.
Right. This is a great question, and it's a sensitive question, and I want to acknowledge probably not the case with your friend, but like the crazy ex-girlfriend trope is used a lot by men to like dismiss bad behavior. But I understand the essence of your question, and I think this is like one that's for sure loaded, right? And hard is the idea of false allegations. So first I want to acknowledge whenever someone is like, well, what about false allegations? Is one, they are exceedingly rare. They true, actual, fully made up, once we unpack the layers, they are rare. So we need to enter into hearing about something with the understanding that they're not that common. They happen about as often as, other false allegations, like false allegations of being beat up or having something stolen happen. So that's kind of the first premise around that. Someone has a way better chance of being sexually assaulted than they do of being accused falsely of sexual assault. But that being said, I think that we are not the courts, right? It's not up to us to be Judge Judy and find all the facts. So when I hear a story of an allegation, what I hear is that someone has been harmed.
Right.
In some way, at some point in their lives, in their childhood, in their last relationship, in the most recent dynamic, someone was harmed, and that need for safety is surfacing now, right? When we tend to unravel allegations, maybe the harm wasn't a sexual assault, but some other form of harm happened in that relationship, and this person has a need for safety, and that's manifesting like as an allegation. So in terms of like the general public, I think we should be, especially when things are in like the news as opposed to like a friend group, I think we should be critical of all media. I think that that's just a general, in this day of the internet, I think we should be critical of all of the media that we're kind of fed. Within our social circle, I think that the entire justice system is set up to deter, especially women, from reporting. It is set out that maybe they'll start, but they will drop off. They will not make it to a court case because of how violent and re-traumatizing and difficult and sometimes expensive getting justice is. And so knowing that, I think that the general public has an obligation to not participate in that and to support people. When people say they have been harmed, to believe that they need something right now, some sort of support. But that being said, can false allegations happen? Yes. Absolutely. And so I think there's a way to show up for both sides in ways that kind of find out what the need is and support them. What I push back against is the dogpiling that we kind of talked about earlier that kind of happened to you, right? So holding awareness, like, yes, false allegations are possible, but usually at the root is an unmet need that maybe the community can support.
I see. Yeah. I didn't think about it that way before.
But yeah, I mean, I recognize that it is, especially for men with power, is that it is a very apparent risk that at any time you could be in the spotlight for your behavior, right?
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing to acknowledge and a good motivation to move with consent, especially in the age of like internet callouts. Like I just, anytime one of them happens, I just hear like we need better communication skills.
Yeah.
You know, so that you know, ex-girlfriend who isn't coping well with the breakup or with her mental health has support, so she doesn't have to default.
Yeah, well, so like this situation, like it's a completely like abnormal situation. I know a lot about the situation to where I'm confident to say like he is not in the wrong. Right. At all, but like he does have status, and there is like a possibility that this could happen.
Yeah, and we were talking before about just the repercussions that it could still cause, even if the person who, like, let's just say they were false allegations, even after it's become public that they were false allegations. Take the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. Even they become
hot potatoes.
Yeah,
nobody wants to work with them.
Exactly. Like from what I've read, like it's still been difficult for Johnny Depp to find work, even though, you know, he like won the case technically, right? And so it creates this whole thing of like, you know, like these are people's livelihoods at stake. And so I think when I made that statement, like when I talk about it being fair on both sides, that's what I mean. But I don't mean it in a way that is like saying that whoever is coming out with the allegation is a liar. I'm not saying that at all, you know.
Yeah, and I think like to reference Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like how things turn out in court still isn't always justice, and still just because someone was found like not guilty does not. Again, comes back to like a lot of gender-based violence and sexual assault being a private situation is that we will never know. But you know, we need better tools for these conflicts so that they don't play out in public, so that it's not up to the average person to like take a side. We just like as a society, we're so bad at conflict and so bad at hard conversations that it becomes like this, you know, like the whole thing panned out with you. That's a manifestation of just not having one, critical thinking, and two, just kind of like shame, like I said earlier, is a very powerful motivator. And we're so uncomfortable with shame as a society around mistakes, is that like, oh, you have shame attached to you, I have to distance myself from you. Yeah. And I think that that's a real problem, because at the first word of like a sexual assault allegation, bad, you're a bad person. Yeah. And it can, you know, really, really impact someone, instead of being like, okay, whether you did it or whether you're not, clearly someone needs to connect with you. Yeah. And offer you support, resources, hear your side, and not even like in the terms of like taking sides, but like what is happening and how can the community step in and like help.
Like it's super polarizing. There was a quote that was like floating around during when all this happened that like I just remember, and it just rings very, you know, soundly in my head, which was someone had said like, I'd rather believe a liar than a potential sexual offender.
I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It's like I said, the justice system is set up to be very hostile and violent towards people when they finally get the courage to speak up. We don't have to participate in that. And so it's, you know, because for a long time, women in particular weren't believed, but to add on to that, you know, women of color are perceived as less believable. Queer women are perceived as even less believable, you know? And so why would we perpetuate those narratives? I see. And just assume from the start that someone is lying. So recognizing that the historical legacy is that women haven't been believed, let's open up the door and not let the blinders of our friendship or fame or he's a good buddy of mine inherently tell us that person is lying. Right. But you're right. It's you know, can someone come back from an allegation that is found to be false? It's hard. It's hard.
It's really
because it carries so much weight. I think in our mind, instead of accepting like all of us are capable of consent violations, instead we're like, whoa, a person who SAs is the worst, is like a monster. Yeah. And we don't recognize them to be, you know what, could be one of our friends. You know, it could be. And it's not always a monster. It's a person who has learned behavior that is unsafe or fraught relationships with power, right? We know that in a lot of cases, people who abuse others, they were abused themselves. They weren't taught better. And so it's not always like sexual assault is, you know, obviously a very violent and life impacting and very prevalent situation. But it's not always the monsters down the street jumping out of the bush.
Yeah,
right?
like there are roots to it. You know? It goes on both sides too. I mean, that's like to someone who could like be making the allegations, and just to use the example again, if they were false, like there's a reason for that. You know, there are roots.
That's their call for help.
Yeah, that's their trauma.
Yes.
Like that's the past trauma coming like bubbling to the surface, right?
And that's what I tell, bouncers come to us a lot. So club bouncers or festival bouncers, and they're like, how am I supposed to get to the root of, there's a couple in the club, they're having one of those nights where they're now so mad at each other, and it's kind of toxic on both sides, but I do want to protect, the woman or the feminine person because, she's tiny, she's drunk.
Yeah.
Where does it come to? And I always say, like, when someone comes to you and says, hey, this unsafe thing happened to me, you don't have to become judge and jury. You have to believe that something happened to them, either tonight with their ex there or their current partner there, or in their last relationship or in their childhood, that has activated a need for safety. Yeah. And it's not really on you to find out the objective truth to why, but they have sought you out because they think you can provide an element of that safety. And that's what we're going to believe. So when people come to you saying they've been harmed, or when we say things like believe women or believe survivors, that's to me really what it means. Believe that something in them is hurting.
That's why they came to you for help.
And they trust that you can help fix that.
Yeah. I see. Yeah. I don't know what this made me think of what you were telling me last night about that married couple where
I remember reading this article a long time ago of like, it was a married couple. She was physically abusing him. But he's a 6 foot tall, kind of beefier guy. She's like a small woman.
Wine on him and
so she would like pour wine on his head and then like smash the glass on his chest, and like he had picture proof, all this stuff. And then say who's gonna believe you, stuff like that. And then goes to therapy. And the first thing the therapist will always ask, is he hurting you? Just because of his size and status, power, all that.
Yeah, it's because of our myths around what abuse and harm look like. And yes, power does typically flow that way, but we really do have to undo that lever in our brain that says that it looks a certain way, that it's always men harming women, that it can't happen. I think another common myth is that you can't SA your like long-term partner, or like consent isn't needed in long-term relationships. There's so many myths that we as a society have to unpack so that, you are believed. It's the myths that are the barrier of people being believed, or that help contribute to barriers. And I think this ties to your question earlier about like, where is a reputable source? Yeah. Like how can we, if we think back to like our research skills that we were taught in school in terms of coverage, I think, to use the link I sent you, the Avery Kleiman Vice article on the whole Bassnectar thing, like actual journalism outlets have a code of ethics they have to adhere to. So you'll see throughout that story, we went to Bassnectar's team for comment. They did not provide, right? Yeah. Blogs, I generally do not pay. Like blogs are people's opinion. Blogs are not obligated to validate or get another side or get a perspective. Blogs can put up whatever they want.
Yeah, Reddit is not a credible source.
Reddit is absolutely not a credible source.
Yeah, like so reputable journalistic outlets that have done their due diligence, that have considered both sides. Even like Reddit and social media are good to like, let's see the scope of this thing and who else is talking. But I generally won't take a blog as like a be all end all in my decision making. Yeah,
I did notice that article had a lot of quotes from the people who had given the allegations, and they did go to Bassnectar's team, and they didn't really exactly provide them with a lot of refute.
And they like reference screenshots. Those victims were able to provide their screenshots or the emails or all of the things to help not just take people's word for it, which is risky as a journalist. You can't do that. You're violating your code of ethics.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
Any more additional questions?
What was that thought that I had about the whole coming back from it, false allegation? I'm trying to remember. I'm backtracking.
I think, was it, could you call someone who's falsely accused a victim also? Was it that?
I feel like it was already kind of answered with the way we perceive things being that, you know, the person who is accusing, they are a victim because they need help in some way.
Right.
Maybe the allegations are false, but they're still a victim in the sense that there's something in there causing them to look for safety, look for someone to help, to rescue them from whatever is going on, whether it be the actual allegations or not.
Yeah, like dynamics are often, you know, co-created. And so to me, it's like less about sides and more about people's perspectives and how can we learn from the situation and grow and do better and prevent harm from happening again. Yeah, I take a really transformative justice approach to these things. I really don't like systems of punishment that replicate the carceral system, which is like so harmful, you know? Like I want to prevent things from happening. I want to believe that people can learn and grow. I want to keep the community safe.
Yeah.
But I don't want us, you know, replicating cop-like behavior.
The thought I just remembered now is the comment you used earlier with the whole dogpiling system, which like kind of like circles into like cancel culture and everything. Is just like, you know, we're the public, you know, let those things, I don't know how to put it into words exactly. It's just that idea of like, for example, when it comes to like false allegations, which are very, very rare, of course, the dogpiling system just makes it so hard to come back because everyone's like, cool, you did it, you're done. And then if it's proven that it's false, that they're still done.
Yeah, like I understand the motivation behind, like oftentimes by the time someone posts on social media about their essay or about whatever it is happened to them, they tried other avenues. Like rarely do people default right to doing something like that. The need for their own safety and the safety of others is really, really important. And they've tried to get it, but they haven't been able to. And so they turn to social media. And these networks even have existed even before social media, right? Like women in marginalized communities have long found ways to keep each other safe because they can't rely on, you know, other institutions. Yeah. So I understand the motivation behind it. However, I think that it's short-sighted. There isn't like a long game, you know? If people are moving out of fear of being canceled, that is different than moving in a way that embodies ethical consent. Yeah. And I don't like the idea of fear being a motivator. I would rather people are motivated to enhance their consent literacy and communicate better because they want to be better, not because they don't want to be canceled. And also like the shame element, like, you know, artists being, I do believe there should be consequences. Like if your avenue for harming young women fans was due to your status, a natural consequence should be that you take a break from having that access, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Like that makes sense. However, this idea that if we purge enough artists off the island, the scene will suddenly be pure and safe is dangerous because it's not true, right? So, and I think once people are canceled, what happens to them then? Like if everyone's like, oh, shame, can't be friends with you, don't want to, you know, that person is less likely to engage in behavior like the education needed to change their behavior because they have no one around them anymore.
They're no longer in the light.
Yeah. So, or even like their friends, I think like, oh, I don't want to be associated with them. So how are they going to change their behavior? So I think it's a misconception that like, oh, if we just cancel all of the people, things will change. Guess what? There's new people coming up who don't understand consent. Like the problem isn't going to go away.
Yeah, like the accountability kind of goes out the window. This made me think of Mimi Page's her Tumblr post, which I think is beautifully worded.
Yeah, I love Mimi. Mimi, if you're listening, I love you.
Yeah, it was such a well written letter, and like I just love how grounded she was in the letter and how it was like, look, this is not me outing you because like I hate you, you know, this is me outing you because like you need to be held accountable. And in actuality, like I care, you know, like I do care. It's like tough. She says, I think she even says tough. It's this tough love, you know? And I think that's like really important, because if we can't hold each other accountable and learn from our mistakes, then how do we become better? Right.
Yeah. And I think Mimi is a perfect example of being a victim of consent violations that were non-sexual at the hands of Bassnectar, and wanting better. And that really turned into her becoming quite an advocate. We, Good Night Out, Mimi Page and Dance Safe partnered on a campaign. Yeah,
I saw that. Yeah.
The Healing is Power campaign that is all about abuse of power in the music industry and how to negotiate better conditions. And I think that's a byproduct of the pain that she kind of felt in that letter.
Yeah.
But I do want to name that although accountability is important, it's not on the victims to do the education. Like Mimi Page, none of the SA victims of Bassnectar are responsible for his education. It is on him or on any perpetrator to seek it out, to engage with it, and to not make more work for the victims.
Or like I guess a step further would just be like that's like the public can also help bring accountability to that person as well.
Yeah, definitely. And no one is also owed the space to be accountable. Like there's a time and a place, and it doesn't happen overnight. And if the person isn't ready to engage, like the victim is not, you know, it's not the right time. Is they don't ever have to accept the apology, or they don't ever have to accept who. It's really personal. There's not a lot of people doing that work, you know, of like engaging perpetrators of sexual violence in restorative accountability processes. They're really rare. We're not quite there yet as a society, but I hope that one day we will be.
Yeah, especially, and like to that point earlier about the music industry, like it's hard, you know, for smaller artists. And like I feel like reading that whole section about Mimi's her relationship with Bassnectar and how he treated her in terms of the collaborations they had and everything, it's so apparent. And like the parallels between like the power dynamic with the music industry and the power dynamics with SA is scarily like just so similar, you know?
And that's the thing, these men, whether it's in film or whether it's in music, are often surrounded, especially by the time you get to Bassnectar's stature. There's not very many decisions he was making for himself, right? Like he's surrounded. So yes, at the end of the day, Bassnectar is responsible for his behavior, and particularly the grooming that was involved here. But within any artist, there are people around who often have opportunities to be like, hey, can we talk about, you know, how many people are coming backstage, or can we talk about, but you know, there's such a culture in both of these industries of being surrounded with yes men. Like, whatever you want, I'm going to turn a blind eye. And so the whole industry kind of needs to hold each other accountable in a lot of ways.
And honestly, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, which I'm stuck on, is how we choose to perceive ethical consent. Because like you were saying, it's so hard for some of these smaller artists because, well, artists, actors, whatever, just people in general, we live in a fear of being canceled, when in reality, forget about living in fear. No, we live in a way of, I want to make everyone feel safe. I want to make everyone feel comfortable, taken care of. And I don't need to worry about being canceled, because it's not going to happen if I'm making sure everyone is always taken care of.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I get asked most, especially from young men, is like, how do I not screw consent up? Like, I don't ever want to be accused of like missing a sign or like harming someone. And really, like, the ethical consent is my answer to that. When you treat all of the people you're in relationship with, so in music, you know, your managers, the smaller artists, the lighting tech, the bartenders at the venue, when you treat all of them with ethical consent and you prioritize ethical consent in all of your relationships, not just your sexual ones, the odds that you will get accused of sexual assault are very slim, because people will see your behavior as like, you know, you know, not that it's a shield, or a way to be like, no, I would never do that. See how, but in a way that where you truly embody ethical consent with all people, that is one of the strongest ways to like not misread a signal.
Just be a good person.
Just be a good person.
Make sure everyone feels safe.
Ethical consent. I think that's personally, that's one of the things I'm going to walk away from this conversation with, is just that specific term. Because I've always known the word consent. We all know the word consent, but ethical consent, whether you've practiced it before or not, know what that looks like. Knowing what that looks like is a great step forward for anyone who's feeling you know what, I want to make sure everyone is feeling taken care of.
Yeah, make sure everyone is comfortable, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be in a I guess, sexual interaction kind of situation, just in general. Yeah. Make sure everyone is comfortable.
Yeah. Like even with friends, coworkers, family, whatnot, like, you know, you always want to make sure, like, do you feel comfortable in this situation? You know, like
check in with your friends.
Checking in with your friends, checking in with your family, checking in with your people, like.
Yeah, asking before hugs at festivals is like a really easy way to like.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not gonna name names, but this happened to a new friend I just made at Beyond Wonderland. I'm a big like kiss on the cheek kind of person. I gave this person a hug, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and then I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Is that okay?" Like, and she's like, "Oh, that's totally fine. Like, honestly, I love hugs. It made me happy to like have that little like intimate moment." But it's just like, you know, mistakes happen, and like I'm. Speak up immediately if you feel like you may have, you know.
Yeah, in the moment, don't be afraid to like tell someone you feel uncomfortable. Like it is okay to say that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, part of being good at consent is being good at hearing a no. So if your friend's like, actually, that made me feel weird. Awesome. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you for letting me know.
I will not do that again. Yeah.
Normalize the communication.
Yeah. And owning up to your mistakes. I think as you've really like demonstrated today, I think that needs to be acknowledged too.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Stacey, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on to this episode.
Yes.
You've helped us learn so much, and I really strongly believe that this is going to be so useful for everyone watching this. And really make a positive impact on the community.
Yeah. I will speak this because you were saying you've been rave mom your whole life and now you're doing it as a living. I'm rave dad, so this is really cool in the sense that like I'm gonna take the stuff that I've learned and not try, but I will be, you know, passing and applying it to others. You know, like it's not just like about, oh yeah, I make these people feel comfortable. No, I want you to make your fellow peers feel comfortable. I want you to check on the people around you. I want you to be ethically consensual to everyone around you and make sure that those people are, so on and so forth.
Yeah. If there are any resources that you want to give a direct reference or shout out to, please let the people know. We will include them in the description.
Yeah, I think, you know, coming to the end of the episode, if someone is feeling a little bit activated by some of the things we talked about today, the RAIN, you know, they're the national hotline for survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault. So definitely don't hesitate to contact them. Our Instagram, which is Good Night Out _Vancouver. We post lots of like digestible content about consent, especially at events. And also all of our workshops are currently free for the next little bit. So anyone connected to the music industry can book a virtual workshop and bring up your skills.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that you would like to plug, please let everyone know.
Well, you know, people who listen to your podcast go to festivals, so please come up to Base Coast. It's really fun. It's in the forest. It's a good Canadian festival. You know, we have solid harm reduction, so come Canadian on up and say festivals. Hi. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you work a little. You said you worked a little bit with DanceSafe too. Is there anything you want to plug on DanceSafe?
I mean, DanceSafe is God tier in my books. They are so essential to the electronic music community in the States. What they do is amazing. So I think, you know, part of my deciding to buy a ticket is harm reduction going to be there, you know? And so if DanceSafe is going to be at an event, you're going to pop by the booth, say hello, get earplugs, like protect your ears.
Yes.
Protect your ears.
Get earplugs and say hi to them.
I don't know if DanceSafe works with like Insomniac, but I know End Overdose has been partnered up with Insomniac as of late.
Yeah. Get yourself, you know, test kits and naloxone and whatever you can. Be super equipped to be that rave mom or dad, or get trained to give naloxone. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's, again, I just want to reiterate that it's so cool that like you came all the way down here from I mean, I know you came out for other things, but like, I mean, you also, you took the time out of your day to come
your vacation or your trip to come and be on this podcast to help educate each and every one of us and to help honestly educate our audience as well. Like this isn't one of those like, oh yeah, we just wanted to like hear you talk. No, like I wanted to learn and I wanted to push and have our audience learn as well.
Yeah, and we want to keep pushing the message too. I know I talked to you about we have an event on 420 coming up that we really would love to have you guys have representation at as well. And so, thank you guys all so much for watching and for being here with us today.
Thank you.
I'm Devin.
No. you usually go. It's you. I'm Brin.
I'm Nand.
I'm Stacey.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
You.
Bye.
Doodles.